Who saw the movie Revenant? Just raise. That's a pretty amazing movie. It's a very lovely movie with amazing cinematography. You um, beautiful images, nice story. They used this camera, Arri Alexa 65, for shooting this movie. This is not Arri Alexa 65, sorry. 65 is a bit, yeah, this one. They use this one for shooting Revenant. It's like $200,000 camera. It costs more than two. And every one of these lenses, they use very sharp lenses. Every one of them is costing more than $20,000. Every one of them. Is filmmaking that expensive? Is it a dream, a very far dream for every one of us? Today we are going to talk about that. We are going to talk about technology, the technology behind filmmaking, and how achievable it is. Have you seen the movie Tangerine? Yeah, it's an amazing movie about transgender people. It's been premiered in Sundance Festival, and it won lots of awards. Just have a look at few shots of this movie. Looks like someone has a crush. Cindy's back on the block? Oh yeah, she's back. She's back and she's going hard. Merry Christmas, bitch. Woo! I got some good news to tell you about me and Chester. I know what it is. You're breaking up with him. Thank God. He's gonna be cheating on you like that. Wait. What? You didn't know? The images are great. We have nice lighting, we have nice camera movements, shooting outside, indoor, outdoor, night shooting, very clean images. So, do you know what camera they used for shooting this movie? iPhone. That's pretty crazy. They used iPhone Tangerine. So they used the smartphone that you have in your pocket. So how should I understand that which type of camera, which type of technology is going to work for me? This is our discussion for today, talking about cameras. What is a camera and what is a good camera? Well, I start from very basic ideas, very basic concepts, and then I go to the more advanced technologies. Basically, camera is just a box. From long ago, even since Plato, if you read some philosophy, you know that Plato talks about the projected light in the cave. If you have heard of it, it's the same concept. If you stay in a dark room, and then there would be just a tiny hole on the wall, and then the light travels through the hole and projects the image of the front of the hole upside down. Well, actually, camera is just a box with a hole on it. The classic painters used the same concept for painting. So they were making dark boxes called camera obscura, and the painting subject was standing in front of the camera obscura. Her image was, the light rays was traveling through the hole, and then her image was forming on a translucent piece of cloth or paper, and the painter was painting based on that projection. Later on, they added a lens on it. So what is a lens actually? A lens is anything that can converge the light rays to a point. Actually, a water droplet is also a lens. You know, it converges the light to a one single point. So you can see that actually the image of the flower has been converged and has been formed like a movie in these eye droplets. There is a lens in our eyes. So there is one single lens in every one of us, well, actually a pair of it, and the light passes through the lens and the picture is formed on the human eye retina, which is the sensor of our eye. So what they use for camera obscura, they use one single convex lens. So the convex lens just converges all the light rays to one point that we call focal point. And the distance between the lens and the focal point we call focal length. We will talk about that later. So we have a box that has a hole and a lens on it. The lens for forming the picture better. But it's not enough, because we cannot control the light coming in. And how can I, well, I can see the image, but I cannot record it. As soon as the image is gone, you know, as soon as I move the camera. So about 200 years ago, a scientist, Joseph Niepce, he used bitumen. It's the name of a material. He used bitumen on a plate, on a metal plate. And using his camera, this is his own camera. Actually, this is his camera in his actual room. He used this camera and exposed his yard, some buildings in front of his window. You can see those buildings for about 8 hours. So this is the first permanent, this piece of metal plate, and you kind of can see the same image on that. This is the first permanent photograph, and it is still, we have it on a museum in France. So, and then later on, I just go very fast because history is boring, I know that, but I just want to cover all the basic concepts. Later on, they invented they discovered that silver highlights can record the picture much better. So silver highlight crystals were used, and you can see that some part of it is burned. They are black. So instead of a piece of metal and a bitumen on it, they used some celluloid base or plastic base with silver highlight on top of it. These crystals were exposed to the light and they burn. And then you wash those that are not burnt. So what remains is a piece of plastic with some burned silver highlight crystals on it. And it is the negative for printing the photograph. So they were using some metal plates. Then they started using papers and celluloids, and later on plastics as the basement for the material. But so we have a box that has a hole and has a lens, and we have some material to record the image, but still we need to control the light. So I don't want to expose the image for a whole life. So the first way of controlling the light was the lens cap. It was the first introduction of shutter. So the lens cap, when I open the lens cap, the image is getting exposed, and when I close it, exposure is done. So it's the shutter actually. But it was not enough for controlling the light. So they created these little holes. So not just the lens cap, not just this tiny cap for closing and opening lens, it was not enough. So we needed some smaller holes or larger holes for different situation. When the light is too much, I want to narrow down the hole, so the light, it avoids too much light to get into the camera. This is the early form of aperture. Later on, the shutter, instead of opening, and because the film becomes more and more sensitive, so I cannot open and close the door for 1/30th of a second. So they end up creating this. It's like a blind curtain, and it opens and closes up quite fast. So this is the film, and this is the shutter. So the shutter opens and closes in front of the film very fast. And for the aperture, they put all those little holes next to each other and end up with a mechanism, lots of blades next to each other. So those blades, it's a single mechanism for making a small hole and a large one. So it's a mechanism for controlling the light that comes to the camera. So we are ready for the camera, the introduction of 35mm SLR cameras. So why 35mm? Well, they use large one, medium ones, and different formats for the film. But at the end, as a trade-off between the economy and the quality of the image, the 35mm film became a standard in photography and cinematography. So what SLR stands for? It means single lens reflex. What is it? The light goes through, it's a better image. The light goes through the lens. So let's go back a little bit. We have a box that has a hole, that has a lens, and the lens and the light passes through the lens and then through the a hole, an adjustable hole, which is aperture, and then hits a mirror. So the shutters now is a mirror. So it hits the mirror and then reflects to a couple of other mirrors and then reaches to our eye through the viewfinder. So when I press the button, this mirror jumps up. It goes up and the film is getting exposed, and then it closes. So this is the first structure of, still the movie cameras has kind of the same structure. So we have a box, we have a sensitive material that records the picture, we have a door for opening and closing that exposure, we have a controllable and adjustable hole for controlling the amount of light, and we have a lens. But one single lens is not enough. Why? You know, look at human eye. Human eye has one single lens, but we have a curved sensor on the back of our eye. But in cinema and in camera sensors, there is no curved sensor. They are all flat. So we have to flatten the image. For flattening the image, one single lens is not enough. Maybe in future, scientists discover how to make a curved and convex sensor. Then we can use just one single lens in front of the camera. So they created a more advanced, but they put different type of glasses next to each other, different groups of lenses, convex and concave lenses, and 2D lenses has been developed. When you bring these groups of lenses together or make them far apart from each other, you are actually zoom in or zoom out. So this is the structure of a modern lens. At least in the most simple lenses, you have at least 6 pieces of glass. At least 6 pieces of glass, some sliding structures and some rings that you can move these glasses and you can enlarge the gaps between them or make them closer to each other, bring them closer to each other, and you have the aperture inside the lens and also lens coating. It's not just a simple glass. The last one, there are layers of coating in front of the lens, so it avoids UV, ultraviolet rays and other stuff. So the lenses are either prime or zoom. At the beginning, all the lenses were prime. A prime lens has a fixed field of view. Field of view, so you know that a lens that sees a large environment is a wide lens, and a lens that zooms in one single character or one single point is a telephoto lens. So the prime lenses, if you want to change the focal length, you change the lens. Still, the highest quality and the sharpest lenses are prime lenses because the structure is simple and there is no moving mechanism inside that. So they last longer, they are sharper, and they are better. But they are not as effective as zoom lenses. So they later we created zoom lenses. Zoom lenses is a combination of different focal lengths. So you can start from a wide angle point field of view to a more closed and zoomed field of view, all in one single lens. But the disadvantage of zoom lenses, they are expensive. They have too many different parts in them, so they are not as sharp as prime lenses. In cinema, most of the time, cinematographers use prime lenses. The lenses that they use for movies, they are huge. So why they are so huge? Because a large and huge piece of glass can absorb and can direct light much better. They are the same size because if you have seen a cinema rig like this, there are too much different parts. And imagine that you want to just change that part, that lens. You want to go from a wide angle lens to a telephoto lens. Then you don't want to move all those stuff. So they are kind of the same size. And they have the same T-stop. The widest aperture of all those lenses is the same. So you can read that this is 25, 32, 40. So it becomes, the focal length becomes changes, but the lens size doesn't change. And the camera mount, you can see that the camera mount is very long. It's a PL mount. What about early film cameras? We talked about photographic cameras. Quite parallel to the photography, the cinematography develops. This is the first camera from Lumiere Brothers. The early cinema cameras, well, everything is quite similar to the photography. Almost everything. So in photography, you take one picture at a time. Now you have to record 24 frames at a time. So you cannot take 24 frames right away after each other. So what you do, you use film rolls. Film rolls into the camera, get exposed, and then rolls back to the other part of the camera. We call this part magazine. So the film strip rolls in and rolls back to the magazine and get exposed here. So lens is the same. The concept of the lens is the same. The concept of aperture is the same. The concept of exposure, everything. So we just this is from one of the first cameras, movie cameras, film cameras. So the film strip rolls in, gets exposed, and then rolls back. But what happens to the shutter? We cannot have the shutter open and close very fast. So they created a rotating shutter. This is a circular shutter. It's a circular piece of metal in front of the film, and it has a gap in it. So it rotates, and when the gap reaches to the film gets exposed, and then it blocks the film. So while the film strip is moving down, it is blocked, and then suddenly get exposed, and then blocks, get exposed. You hear that this term shutter angle in cinematography. It refers to this, the distance between two blades of this rotating shutter. Later on that we are going to talk about digital cinema cameras. You will see that the difference between a non-professional cinema camera and a professional one of them is the rotating shutter. So still we use them. Still we use a rotating shutter. Slowly the technology develops and the film is replaced by sensor. In early time it was all black and white sensor. Even for color cameras, they were using prism, a set of prisms. So these prisms were separating the blue, red, and green lights, and they were exposing different colors to different CCDs or sensors. And inside the camera, it merges them and creates the color image. So everything is quite the same. Let's go back. We have a box that has a hole, that has a lens, and has an aperture and a shutter inside that, and a viewfinder and a sensitive. It was a sensitive material before, and now it's a sensitive sensor. Digital camera revolutionizes and liberated the cinematography and photography. So because in the previous era, everything was expensive, everything was mechanical, was based on chemistry, and using all those materials was quite expensive. But now, with the introduction of computers and digital cinematography and digital photography, everything is more accessible. So we can now experience filmmaking by our own cameras. What digital cameras has that the old one doesn't? Well, the image sensor, instead of film, we have an image sensor. Most of the time we call this image sensor, most of the time it is a CMOS type of image sensor. It is CMOS. And the rest is kind of the same. So we have a lens, we have an aperture inside the lens, the shutter is still the same. So just the sensor has changed, and a couple of other things has been added, like a processor. Every camera has a computer inside it. So it has a processor. The new cameras has an LCD screen, so we can monitor shooting, there is an AF or autofocus metering. I'm going to talk about it later. What is digital cinema cameras? What is the difference between a very expensive camera that they use on shooting feature films and our DSLR camera? Well, in this picture you can see two very famous, actually two leading market rivals these days, an Arri Alexa and Red camera. They are the main cameras that they use in different films. A cinema camera has a couple of things that you don't see in a normal DSLR camera. They have global shutter or that rotating shutter. This one. This is a big important thing for every camera. When I'm going to talk about rolling shutter artifact, which is a terrible artifact in DSLR cameras, you will understand the importance of this rotating shutter. They have PL mounts. PL mounts is the gate that the lens is being mounted on in DSLR is quite narrow, but in cinema camera is quite strong and thick because it is supposed to hold very heavy lenses. They have professional audio connections. Most of the less professional cameras don't have this type of connections. They can record higher frame rates, and they have large batteries, so you are supposed to shoot all day long, so you need a large battery and a big one most of the time. Large viewfinders, look at this viewfinder, and remote access and LUT. LUT is a concept that you can see the graded film through your viewfinder and inside the monitor, but the movie is going to be recorded on RAW format. It's a bit complex. I'm going to explain it later. And the cinema lenses. So these were the difference between cinema cameras to the less professional cameras. Cinema lenses, as I told you, they are sharper, much sharper. There is no lens breathing. What is lens breathing? Why a cinema lens is so expensive? One of the things is lens breathing. Breathing test. This is a cinema camera lens. When you see that this is Shane Herbelt. He's really great. He's a really good DP, and okay, using a normal lens, when you do when you focus pull, when you pull the focus, come on, let me find